The story I'm about to tell is much different and more of an account of strange events. Anyway, off we go. This takes place in the south of Brazil, in a city called Curitiba. In the downtown area, there's a shitty street that is infested with crime, drug traffic/abuse, but has been somewhat cleaned up, but not really. Lots of small bars and pubs popped up and it has become a trendy/all-tribes place that young people like to go to at night during the weekends. Place is called Rua Trajano Reis, Curitiba. I used to go there every now and then because a friend of mine owned one of the pubs on that street. As I mentioned previously, drugs are common here. In fact, they're so common you're often approached by dealers asking what do you want? Crack, cocaine, LSD etc., out of the blue. It's that bad. So as I mentioned, a friend of mine used to own a pub there. The precise address was Rua Trajano Reis, 369, Curitiba. You can Google it if you want, but I attached a pic so you can see it. Pic obviously related. This picture is from the time before it was renovated. I worked there during the renovation process along with another friend of mine. Total time spent was around 3 months, and then another 2 months for extras/details. This friend and I were the first to spend time in the building and the first to see it after it was made available for business. An old lady died in this house. She was Jewish. I'll tell you how I know later on. She was 77 years old and lived by herself in this gigantic house. You can't see it from the front, but it's really huge, about 350 square meters if I remember correctly. Oh, when I say she died in the house I mean she was killed by a drug user. Some piece of shit crackhead apparently broke into the house and knifed her in the throat. There are articles available on the internet about this case. I picked one such article to use it as a link here. This is the original in Portuguese, which I imagine many of you can't read, so here's one translated, by Google, to English, pic related. Pic related is what it looks like after it was renovated. So as you can see from the article, the owner of the house was killed in 2010. My friend decided to rent this place and open the bar in 2016, that means the house was closed off for 6 years. The sons of the owner were in a legal battle for ownership of the house and they didn't even bother keeping it clean, so it was left in the state it was when the old woman died. When we entered the house there was a disgusting smell of fluids everywhere and insects on all corners of the house, cockroaches, brown recluse spiders etc. It was a fucking shithole. I'll start dumping some pictures on the next post. So we soon got to work on this fucking shithole. There was far too much to be done, so we were working all day every day, from morning till dawn. I often stayed till very late in the evening here by myself. I'm more of a bricklayer and my friend was more of jack of all trades, master of none. So we ended up having to call in a plumber and an electrician for the things my friend couldn't fix himself. During the very first few days my friend and I started noticing some weird things. Small things like tools missing, tools appearing in places none of us remember going to etc. We were always of the banter kind, but when it was time for work we had a very serious attitude, so this was pissing us off. The plumber we found was a very old guy, in his mid-70s. He wasn't one for talking much and preferred to be left to his own devices. I remember though, on the very first day he came in for work, he started looking around the house and asked me why it was in such a state. Once I told him, he said he'd only work in the morning and by himself. I never really understood the work by myself part, but as long as he did a good job I didn't mind much. The electrician was my brother's recommendation. A pair, an old fart and his son, who happened to be around my age. These guys were very goofy in a way and I wasn't sure I could trust them. They were always arriving late, even on the first day. They were always making jokes etc. Because the house was very old, for Brazilian standards, much of the electrical wiring went through the attic in a very erratic/unplanned way. Shit was a mess. The attic was entered through a very small opening and there was no ladder attached to it, you had to bring your own to go up. So the electrician found himself a ladder and the plumber kept working on his tasks. All was good and well, for a while. The plumber, as I said, was a very traditional/old-fashioned old man and didn't like to be helped at all. As the days passed, we started to notice that he was getting restless and really upset and started to curse a lot when by himself, which was most of the time. Not really sure what to do, I went up to him and asked what was going on. He'd blabber incoherently for long periods of time, never really answering the questions I was asking. You may think this would be the case for a guy in his mid-70s, but everyone who recommended this guy had amazing things to say about him. Even my own father worked with him in the past and vouched for him. He seemed to be very lucid before coming to work with us. Anyway, what I noticed is that he was going out of his way to fix things that didn't need fixing. He was even bringing materials that he bought on his own to fix problems no one had identified. But he wouldn't mention why/how he knew of them, and whenever you asked him to go because his work was done, he'd give you an odd death stare and just say something under his lip and keep working. Remember, this is the guy who said he'd only work in the morning. He was staying there until late in the night and would only leave once he noticed everyone was about to leave too. After a few weeks of this, I wasn't really sure what to do. He wasn't charging us for the repairs and seemed to not be bothering anyone else, so I figured I might as well leave him be. One day he comes up to me out of the blue and says I am done. He was done a long fucking time ago. Smiles and leaves without saying another word or paying attention to me. I tried giving him money but he didn't even bother looking. He just grabbed all of his tools and left. I tried calling him a few days later and he wouldn't answer. I asked my father to call him too and he got the same, no response whatsoever. Final part, sorry if it's uneventful, I did state this was more of an account of sorts, the goofy electrician and his son. They started working on the old wiring and soon began complaining about weird things. Like, they'd come out of nowhere and say, "What did you need?" What was that? No one was even close to them but they'd swear they heard someone calling for them. They didn't really seem bothered by it though. They weren't religious or anything like that, so I guess they thought we were pranking them or something. There was a day when these two were really late, think 3 or 4 hours late, for work, and because my friend and I had been on the construction site since early in the morning, we told them to come for work at night. We handed them the keys of the house and went home. On the following day, they came earlier than expected. It was like, the only time these two were punctual. Actually, scratch that, the son was the only one who came, driving his father's car, and he said he spoke for both of them in that they wouldn't charge anything for the service they had completed up until that point, but they were also no longer going to work there. Now that was something. I asked him what the fuck was wrong and why didn't he want money that rightfully belonged to him. He said, "Last night, father and I were working here." So he went to the attic as usual and I was working on the first floor. Now I'm not really superstitious or anything, but there's definitely something wrong with this place. I kept hearing my father calling for me, but every time I went up there, he looked as though he hadn't even moved. He said he heard whispering and calling for him too all of the time, especially coming from the bedroom below, where the old lady used to live. He said he heard a phone ringing, pig fucking related I imagine, and heard people talking to each other. He kept saying he wouldn't stop hearing shuffling and steps. He made sure his father wasn't moving but he kept hearing them. He said they were so strong he just couldn't bear staying there anymore. So they didn't finish the job and went home, decided they wouldn't come back either. Now, through all of this, I myself had stayed in the house, during the night, by myself quite a few times. I did notice some weird things here and there, but I attributed it mostly to the house being very old. You know, creaks, noises in general. It was an old house, so those were bound to happen. The worst that happened to me that I remember was the tools that kept missing and appearing in unexpected places all of the time, and this continued well after we finished the renovation process. Once my friend, the bar owner, opened the bar, he complained about this very same problem, things that went missing for no reason. Anyway, if you read this far and you paid attention, you'll remember I said the old lady was Jewish. I know this because I found several Jewish things in her house, but among all of them, the one that caught my attention was some symbols that were fixed to the entrance of certain doors, 3 to be precise, one being her bedroom. I don't remember exactly what they looked like, but they had inscriptions in them that looked like Yiddish. And I remember that the dumbass guy who worked with me on the house removed them on our very first day there. I wonder what those were and what was their purpose. In case you're wondering what the Jewish things were, some Anon helped me find out. He was a Jew. Rectangular boxes a few centimeters, 3 or 4 by 8 to 10, long and 1 or 2 wide. If so, they were probably Mezuzahs. These are just simple talismans that Jews are supposed to place on the doorways of homes and, depending on your rabbi, businesses. They contain, usually, a blessing for the home and a prayer that basically says there is one God and it is Adonai, you dumb fucks. They're there mainly to represent the presence of God, sorta like the circle hat that Jews are supposed to wear. Also, the inscription was Hebrew and could have been anything from just the name of or a character representing God, to the entire prayer or a separate blessing for the house. Also, it may actually be taboo to remove them, so maybe check up with a priest or rabbi or somebody if your friend is super concerned.